Hi, welcome to EMPAC's first virtual E-Meet-up. We're really excited to get this going, and we're really excited to talk with you guys and get some of your questions answered. I'll introduce myself. So my name is Amanda, and I'm part of the Emerging Museum Professional Advisory Committee. I work at the Royal Ontario Museum in membership, and I do their e-communications. I'd like to introduce some of the other members. I'll start with Braden.
Hi, my name is Braden Murray, and I work at the Lake of the Woods Museum in Kenora. Grew up on the East Coast, moved to Ontario for school, and now I'm working in way Western Ontario at the Lake of the Woods and the beautiful shores of Kenora. So I've been on the EMP committee for a few years now, and I'm looking forward to this event. I think it's a pretty wild thing that we can all sit in front of screens, computers, and monitors, and talk to each other. It's like we're in the future. So this is pretty cool.
Okay, and I'll head to Lisa.
Sorry, Amanda. Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa, and I am currently I work for the Oshawa Museum, a lovely little community just outside of Toronto, and I'm currently their community engagement coordinator. And I'm a fairly new addition to the Emerging Museum Professional Advisory Committee, but I'm super excited to be part of it.
And now to Christine.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christine Moreland, so I work for the Ontario Museum Association, or the OMA, and I'm the Museum Succession Project Coordinator. So the Museum Succession Project was funded for 3 years by the Trillium Foundation, and one of the initiatives or part of the projects is to organize the Emerging Museum Professionals Advisory Committee, of which we have 3 members here today, and really to support EMPs in their professional development and to kind of grow that community and get their voice heard within the museum sector. So that's really what EMPAC is here for. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the OMA, just kind of give you an understanding of what it is. So the Ontario Museum Association's mission is to build capacity among individuals and institutions active in Ontario's museum sector. So they represent in total quite a lot of institutions. There's actually over 700 museums, galleries, and historic sites, 10,000 professionals, and 16,000 volunteers. So everybody, hopefully everybody, is a member of the OMA, and what we do, and we provide a lot of professional development opportunities, networking. We have our annual conference that's upcoming in a few weeks. Yeah, we really try to advocate for the museum sector to make sure that we're being heard by people who might be able to assist us in the government and other organizations as well.
Great, thanks. So we have a couple of ways that you can answer questions tonight. So if everyone can put their mouse over the left-hand side of their screen, you'll see a blue button with a Q&A on it. So if you click on that, a little screen should pop up on your right-hand side, and you can type in any questions that you have in that section. If there's a question that someone else has asked and you liked it, you want to bump it up, you can click a little plus button, and that'll bring their question all the way up to the top. There's another option. If you put your mouse over the left-hand side of the screen once again, you'll see a little blue box with some white scribbles in it. If you click on that, it'll take you to our chat area, and you can type in there as well. And if you have a question that you wanted to ask tonight but didn't get the chance, you can also tweet it out using our hashtag GoEMP, or you can write it in our Facebook group, also GoEMP.
Braden, do you want to tell us a little bit about EMPAC?
Sure. So I've been on the EMPAC committee, I guess, since the beginning of the Museum Succession Project. Christine mentioned that the Ontario Museum Association does a lot of advocating for Ontario museums and works with multi-layers of government to kind of help Ontario museums find their way through the ether in Ontario. I guess that's sort of what we're trying to do with emerging museum professionals, sort of within the OMA. We we recognize in the Ontario Museum Association there's a huge amount of people that are just beginning their careers, and there's not a lot of support out there for them. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a support network. Training, getting to know each other is a big part of it. It's a situation where there's a lot of people that are going to be retiring in the next 5 to 10 years, and we recognize that Ontario museums are going to need a lot of people to step up to the plate. So that's something that we are really keen on trying to help with, and really keen on trying to bring people together and kind of help make that transition. And in another project the OMA is working on now, there was a quote from a senior member in Hamilton that said, in the late 70s, early 80s, there was a huge group of us that came through, and he said it was like a python that ate a basketball. You know, it's kind of this huge group of people that's moving through. And when they start to retire, we need to make sure that we can hold on to the institutional memory that we have at our museums, and also make sure there's a smooth transition so that we continue to do as well as we can for Ontario and for our communities. So that's our OMA EMP pitch.
So Lisa, I know that you had a few questions. Do you want to start maybe by throwing those out there?
Yeah, sounds good. But before I did, I thought I would just quickly let everyone know about some really fun initiatives that are coming up. In the past, the EMP committee has hosted a number of meetups in Toronto. We're very excited that this is our first virtual meetup, and we're hoping that there's people from all across the province who are with us right now. But yeah, in the past we have met up at restaurants around Toronto, and it's been an opportunity to get together, have some fun, talk about museums, talk about the career path that we're going on, and we're hoping to have more of them coming up in the coming months. But right now, the big thing on our agenda is conference. And your EMP committee has got a couple different really awesome activities planned for the conference in Windsor. If you are a student currently at the U-of-T program, Fleming, Centennial, and Algonquin, I believe the OMA, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Christine, the OMA has offered free admission for students in this program, so it's a great opportunity to attend conference and to start the networking process, as we all know is very important in this field. So one of the very first things that we're really excited about at conference is the Take Control of Your Career session being hosted by Christine Moreland and Jenna Rose from the National Ballet School. It's going to be exploring lots of different ways that you can, as the title suggests, take control of your career. It's going to be talking about different career paths that people in this field will end up taking, finding professional development funding, how to market yourself, sometimes a little hard thing to do, but very, very important. The importance of seeking volunteer opportunities, as well as mentor and mentee relationships. Speaking of the importance of that, we realize that that's always an important part of the field, and another initiative we're excited about is Conference Connections. If you signed up for conference, there's another little link on the conference page for you to become a mentee. And we really hope you take advantage of this program. We first ran it last year. Huge success. Everybody from the mentors and mentees all really enjoyed the program, and it's a chance to connect with people you might not necessarily get a chance to connect with. We are also hosting pop-up talks, more informal chances to meet with more seasoned career people at the conference during coffee breaks. Lots of different topics. We're very excited about that. And last but not least, on Thursday night after the awards banquet, we are hosting a trivia night. So if you're a trivia buff, enjoy Ontario museums, things historical or artsy in nature. This is going to be a fun opportunity. There will be a prize, pretty excited, and we really do hope that you're able to attend conference. Beyond that, keep an eye on our Facebook page, which is the Group of Ontario Emerging Museum Professionals, and we post all of our events there. If you've got any questions about any events, or if you want to host your own meetup, let us know. We're always supportive of that. So after I've rambled on about all the different events that we've got coming up, very excited about conference, I thought I'd get it started with more of a general question, and please jump in, leave comments. We're really excited to hear what you have to say, but I'm going to turn it over first to the members of the committee. What museum or perhaps museum exhibit has made an impact on you and why?
Well, I can jump in on this. I've had quite a few very positive experiences at museums in my life. It's something that, as a family, that's kind of where we went for fun. We were a family of nerds, and that's what we did, and it was a great time. But I would say one of the most impactful museum experiences that I've had, and it's there's been a few different sites. Been at living history museums. There's something about living history, whether it's Fanshawe Pioneer Village, Kings Landing Historical Village, Upper Canada Village, Louisburg. There's something about being able to walk the streets, go through the sites, kind of pick things up and hold them, and you get your hands all full of wool and sweep the floor and taste the bread. I think there's something that's very powerful about that. It's an excellent thing, and I wholeheartedly recommend it. So for museum experiences, that would be my kind of go-to, the full 360 experience. From working there to going to visiting and seeing all the different things, all the different possibilities those sites have. Yeah, I think it's excellent. I think there's nothing better than a good living history museum from my perspective.
Awesome, thanks, Braden. Well, I'll jump in. It's really funny to me that one of the first museums I remember going to, besides the ROM and their amazing dinosaurs, because really that's one of the big bonuses to go into the ROM is seeing some dinos. In grade 4, I remember a school trip where we went to a museum and we learned how to churn butter, and we had a school trip. And we went to a period schoolhouse, and we had a school day outside of school. And it's really funny to me now that this museum I went to in grade 4 is now the museum that I work at. So for me, that's kind of come full circle. It's really, really a great experience for me. I love my boss. She's a wonderful, wonderful person, and I think I kind of push it some days when I tease her that she was probably working that day that I was there in grade 4. But beyond that, there have been 2 exhibits that really kind of stick out for me for being powerful and emotional. One of them is the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. I remember it was just a phenomenal exhibit, which means that they did their job, because it's a very powerful story. It was very moving, very emotional, and for a topic like that, for me to basically walk around the entire time, arms crossed, not able to talk to anyone, not really able to look or correspond with anybody else, I was completely fantastic exhibit. And then I said one, they're kind of 2. But they both relate to the same subject. And I've been drawn to the subject of the Empress of Ireland since as long as I can remember, because I have a family tied to that ship and that disaster. So I think the name of the museum has changed. Back then it was the Musée de la Mer in the Maritime Museum of Rimouski. Really sorry if I'm butchering that name. And it tells the story of the Empress of Ireland and the sinking. And just recently, for the 100th anniversary, the Canadian Museum of History in Gatineau staged their big exhibition on the history of the Empress, featuring fantastic exhibits. And I visited that exhibit with my mom, sister, and grandma. And again, it was just a fantastic experience, fantastic exhibit. So that's me. Amanda?
I'm just going to build on one of your. I also went to the ROM on a class trip, and things also came full circle for me. It was actually my first time visiting a museum ever in high school, and when I got to the ROM, I was blown away by all the collections, the exhibits. So yeah, it definitely changed my perspective on museums, and it really paved the career path that I'm on today. I'm cutting out. Hello? Is it still working?
still there. Sorry, I had my microphone muted while you were chatting, and I had a little bit of a hard time getting it unmuted. Okay. Let's jump into some concerns that might be out there for emerging professionals. One of the first is regarding internships. I know with most programs, internships is a vital component of these programs, and depending on what program, what college, different things like that you're a part of, these internships might be paid or unpaid experiences. I'm going to turn it first to the committee members who are with us today, but if you've got an opinion, please jump in, Facebook, Twitter, comment below. What are your thoughts on internships, paid versus unpaid?
I'll jump in on this one. I did an unpaid internship, and I thought it was excellent. I was a volunteer prior to that for 3 years, and I really feel like my internship gave me the opportunity to do things that I wouldn't have done as a volunteer. So for me, as an emerging museum professional, the experience was invaluable, and it really benefited me greatly. I got to make great connections. I got to get involved with various projects. So for me, it was a really great experience, even though it wasn't paid.
I'm kind of of mixed feelings, especially after hearing Amanda having such a positive experience. I think there is a place for unpaid internships, especially with nonprofits. The reality is, especially for a school program, I think that can sometimes be a worthwhile thing. And the reality is there's not always money in the budget for people to be able to be paid, but kind of the other side of the coin of that would be seeing any sort of businesses or private institutions, or people who probably could scrounge together a couple of bucks, even large municipalities. And I get kind of uncomfortable when I see groups that are clearly able to pay someone and not paying them because they think they can get away with it. So I'm very I don't know. I'm really of two minds on this. And I hate to say it, and it's an answer that's spicy as mayonnaise, but it's a case by case basis. You got to look at it, kind of seeing what you're going to get out of it, and looking at the group that's hosting you. And I think there's a lot of things that go into it, and I think it's very difficult to give a definitive yes and no. Yes, it's a good thing. No, it's a bad thing. That being said, I err on the side of always trying to pay people when we do museum events and have volunteers sing and anything they do professionally. We try to pay them at least something. So I err on the side of paid internships. But like I said, with people having very positive experiences with unpaid, how can you make a definitive answer? So that's my perspective.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Braden, where I remember being in the internship and I loved my experience. It was a fantastic experience. It gave me new opportunities. It brought me in connection with a whole bunch of new people who I might not have connected with, but it was unpaid, which meant that at the end of the 14 weeks, the bank account was hurting, and I was hurting. But I can also see it from the point of view of working for a not-for-profit museum, where it's, as Braden said, not always in the budget. So the experiences that you can get from these internships are valuable. What you contribute to the organizations, in turn, again, are valuable. So you're getting something regardless out of the experience. But I remember what it was like in week 13, 14, and having a very supportive family and support system around me, and thank goodness for that. But yeah, I agree with you, Brandon. It's very much to mind. It all depends on the situation and where you're at. By the way, for anybody who's out there in the social networking world, please, comments, questions, concerns, let us know. Leave a comment on Facebook. Use the hashtag GoEMP. I'm trying to tweet along with the questions that I'm answering. So if at any point you want to tweet back, please follow the hashtag and let us know.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in on that last one, the internships, because we actually received an update on one of our conference sessions. So on the Thursday afternoon from 2:45 to 4 o'clock, there's a session called Bridges and Barriers to the Next Generation of Museum Workers. And it's actually going to be looking at internships and what organizations can do to help emerging museum professionals and what they might be doing to actually limit opportunities as well, either knowingly or unknowingly. So if there's anyone who's an emerging museum professional attending conference this year, I'd really encourage you to go to that session to hear what other people in the room are talking about, but also to be able to voice your concerns and your thoughts about it. And actually, I have a kind of follow-up question to that. I'm curious, did you guys do full-time internships where you weren't doing courses or anything else like that at the same time, or was it kind of part-time built into your schedule?
My internship was built in with my school schedule, so I was at my workplace for 3 days a week, and then the rest of my week was spent in the classroom. So it was 3 days a week is pretty substantial. It was enough time to give me the opportunity to get all the work done that I needed for the week.
Yeah, the internship that I had to do for public history at Western, I guess I was full-time, but I was also doing schoolwork. It was I guess it was kind of full-time adjacent. Like it wasn't full-time, but it wasn't not full-time. It was kind of in between. It just kind of consumed my life in kind of a weird way. But speaking to what Christine was saying just earlier, I'm now on the other side of this, looking to hire an intern myself, or our organization is, and I know that there are so many different government, different levels of government, and different government programs that make it, whether it's matching or whether it's grants or whether it's assistance in ways that I think it's for people to just kind of throw their hands in the air and say, "Wow, we'd love to be able to pay you, but there's just nothing to it," and give you a slap on the back and say, that's. I think that's kind of a weasel way out. I think there's enough, or at least there are ways of doing it. There are ways of supporting our upcoming professionals. So anyway, so kind of full time, but also kind of not full time.
And I completed the Fleming College Museum Management and Curatorship program, so MMC represent. And it's a fantastic program. Not that I need to sell it to many people who are watching this, because you might have considered it yourself. It's 8 months in class with a 4-month full-time internship. Great program. Fantastic.
I'm just going to jump in because I realized I didn't say which program I was in. So I did the Culture and Heritage Site Management program at Centennial College, and that came along with a 4-month internship.
Cool. Okay, I'm not seeing any new questions out in the Twitter sphere, so I'm just going to jump in and ask a question. And I was asked this last night. I was at a networking event at the U of T iSchool, and this is one that kind of stumped me a little bit. So in turn, I'm turning around and asking my fellow EMPAC members, are certain positions, for example, collections management, curatorial, education programming, are certain positions harder to get into? For example, is there more demand for a certain position than others? And what have you found in your experience?
I can speak to this a little bit. Not that I'm, hiring museum professionals all the time, but I think one of the big sort of, I won't say revolution, but sort of kind of big current that's coming up in Ontario museums right across Canada, really, is the idea of museum education. It's something that was not really even on the radar. The museum that I work at, the Lake of the Woods Museum here in Kenora, it was built in 1985. brand new building, built specifically to be a museum, and there's no area for any sort of programming, any sort of education, any sort of public, nothing. There's none of that, and that was 30 years ago. So when you think about a museum that was built with no concept of public programming or education versus what we have now, I think what we're seeing now is a lot of kind of development of the museum education field, public programming, working with people, and not just cloistering ourselves away with the collection, but actually getting in the collection, getting into the community, rather. I think that is a big part of museums, big part of the museum field, big part of the hiring process now. They're looking for people who are good with kids and good with adults and putting on programs and running weddings and the whole works. So it's I think that's a really big part of what museums are looking for at the moment. There's kind of a need for that. At least it seems to me that is the case.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Braden. As I said, I was asked that last night, and I wasn't quite sure how to answer it, so I'm glad that I was able to turn it over to a couple other people who might have some thoughts on it. Let's move on. I'm not quite seeing any tweets. Please tweet us, guys. We're so excited. We're a friendly bunch. We're happy to chat. The goal with life, I guess, and with the museum sector is to attain that permanent full-time position. Has anyone attained this? And if so, what steps did you take to attain it? Or are we finding right now contracts or part-time employment is more common? And if it's okay, I'm going to jump and just maybe talk a little bit about my experience. I've just recently attained the permanent full-time job, which took me probably 4.5 years to attain. It took a lot of time, a lot of commitment, jumping around between contracts. Coincidentally enough, at the same place, I was very lucky that a couple different contracts came up and I was able to put in my time and my dues. But I attained my first job there, which was permanent part-time, by volunteering. My face was known, my name was known, and when that position opened up, they had asked me they strongly suggested that I submit my application for it, and I did. That being said, my very first year in the field, I was saying to Christine just last night, it was spent 7 days a week working. If I wasn't at my current institution, the Oshawa Museum, I was driving into Toronto working at another fantastic organization. But that meant that I was working 2 part-time jobs 7 days a week. I got a little tired. But for me, I was very lucky that, as I said, contracts opened up. I bounced around between contracts, and eventually the position was able to become full-time. But it meant time and dedication and putting in my dues. And ultimately, if I wasn't volunteering at this organization, I don't know where I'd be in my career or where I would be really in Ontario. So I'm very lucky that I've ended up in my hometown telling a story and the history that I love.
Very cool. Yeah, it's. I guess I was in kind of a similar situation. I bounced around quite a bit. Well, not quite a bit, but to a few different places. I worked at an art gallery for a while. I worked at a living history museum for a while where I milled flour. So if you ever need some flour milled, I can help you out. I'm actually pretty good at it. But yeah, I kind of bounced around between work, between school. Actually, the job that I have now, I actually I applied for it while I was still in school, to be honest with you, and they said, "Oh, great, yeah, you look like a good applicant, and we'll see what happens." And they hired someone else, and I said, "Okay, well, that's the end of that." And then the other person didn't work out, so they got a hold of me a little bit later, a few months later, and they said, "Are you still interested in coming to Kenora and maybe working for us?" And I said, "Yeah, I suppose so." And then that was that. So I loaded up my Dodge Neon and off I went, trucking away across north of Superior, and that was that. That was 4.5 years ago. So it's kind of a weird path that we have. We're all sort of bouncing around like pinballs, trying to figure out where we're going to be, and it's kind of scary in its own way.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting that we're finally able to attain that dream, the dream of full-time permanent. But I am finding when you look at jobs that are out there, contracts or part-time or typically more common.
100% more common. Absolutely, 100% right. I'm seeing here opportunities in Northern Ontario. So for those of you who are not familiar, Ontario goes a little bit further north than Barrie. It actually goes a lot further north. I say that as a rib to my friends in Ontario or in Toronto. I was speaking with some people down there a few years ago, and they said, "Oh, where do you live?" And I said, "Northwestern Ontario." And they said, "Well, I'm from Barrie. Is that?" And I was legitimately, I didn't know what to say. I was a loss for words. So it's just a bit of a rib there. The opportunities in Northern Ontario, it's kind of a neat thing that we're actually pretty connected. The museums up here, basically everything west of Thunder Bay is in the Sunset Country Museum Network. And what we are seeing is there are a number of people who are very close to retirement. And because we're smaller institutions, we get in a situation where there's one or two people at an institution and you're basically in charge of everything. Whether it's public programming, whether it's collections, whether it is making sure that the lights are turned off and changing the bulbs and doing conservation and pretty much just a little bit of everything. So it's really neat from that perspective that it's not segmented in any meaningful way. It's everything just is mashed together, and it's very much kind of the old time museum sort of. What do you do? I work at the museum. A little bit of everything. So it's pretty neat. It's a pretty neat experience. It's scary in some ways because you're thrust into a lot of situations before maybe you're completely comfortable with what you should do. You know, someone brings in a big alligator skin and they say, "Okay, here you go. Take care of this," and you say, "Well, what do I do with this?" And you're calling the M&R, and well, maybe it's poached, and it's a mess. So it's a lot of fun. It's very enjoyable, and it's a great challenge. And there are a lot of people in Northwestern Ontario, the area that I can speak to, that are looking to retire in the next 5 to 10 years. I sit around the table at the Sunset Country Museum Network meeting, and there's an awful lot of gray hair, and I think there's going to be a lot of great opportunity coming up. I know at the Red Lake Museum, they just hired an intern, they hired a curator, they hired someone to take care of the collections. They're all younger people. They're all, I think the fellow that's running it up there now is he's about my age, so he's 29, 30. So it's pretty cool. Like there's going to be a lot of turnover, and I think most of Ontario is like that. So it's exciting stuff is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I myself, I don't think I've ever made it farther north than Algonquin Park, but it just turns out that I've got a lot of Ontario to explore.
There's a ton of Ontario to explore. If I got in my car and you got in your car in Toronto or Oshawa, if you tried to drive to Kenora and I tried to drive to Dallas, Texas, I would arrive in Dallas first. It's a big province that we live in. It's really big. The electoral district, we had the election the other day, the electoral district that I live in is about the size of Poland. It's big. It's a big country we live in. Anyway, it's pretty fun up here. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on.
Actually, I have a question for you guys. So, kind of following up with Braden's awesome story there, what's the strangest experience you've had in a museum? And it could be while you're a visitor, or maybe while you're working there.
Well, I'll jump in. If you're not familiar with the Oshawa Museum, please come visit. First of all, we're amazing. I'm completely biased, but we've got a great site. But we're comprised of 3 historic houses located on the shores of Lake Ontario. What makes our site unique is that all 3 houses are still standing on their original foundations, so that kind of makes us a little bit unique for a site like this. But as I said, we're located right on the shores in a beautiful park. Because of that, wildlife is often something that we have to contend with, be it mice, like any other kind of sites, and we're constantly on pest control, squirrels, raccoons. A couple years ago, there was a mink issue. We're constantly having to avoid seagulls dive bombing us. I never thought that my pest management portion of my museum studies program would be so handy, but it really truly is. Yeah, that's probably the most wild and crazy thing I can think of is contending with a wildlife.
Just speaking to that, we don't have a bad problem with little guys like the raccoons and the minks and that sort of thing. We have a big problem with deer in Kenora, urban deer. And they are not afraid of people. They are not afraid in any meaningful way, and in fact, a lot of people feed them, so they actually get pretty keen on coming over to you and seeing if you have something to give them. So we were having an outdoor movie a couple of years ago, and we were doing a movie out in our courtyard. We were going to watch All Quiet on the Western Front as part of a World War I exhibit. And I was setting up the theater, and I was setting up the screen and the getting it all ready, and I was very excited. And I turn around, and there was a doe and her 2 fawns standing there, very keen on what I was working on to see if I could give them something to eat. And they were not leaving. They were not. They were going to hunker right down. And I was a little bit worried. I was like, am I going to have to call? What do I call the police? What do I do with these deer? Luckily, when people started showing up, they don't like big diesel trucks very much. So when people started showing up, they took off. But that's definitely the most wild and crazy experience from a wildlife standpoint that I've ever had. It's just to have that little rustling behind you and then turn around and mama deer is right there looking in the eye. It's very unnerving, to say the least.
Not quite the same, but we had to find a home for 3 ducks that they were domesticated. Somebody dropped them off in the park, and we called, I don't even know how many different organizations and groups just to try and find out what to do with these ducks because they were domesticated, clipped wings. We didn't know what to do with them. We kept them in our little fenced area behind one of the houses to keep them safe because this is August, our park is busy, it's the highlight of the summer, and yeah, again, duck wrangler. Never thought that would be in a job description. Totally was. How about you, Amanda?
I haven't had any crazy experiences, so I don't think I could top those stories.
No, it doesn't have to be animal related, but in general, maybe any experiences, just wild, crazy, interesting, good stories to share?
Not yet, but I'll save them for the next chat if something comes up for sure.
I actually have one. It's not mine, but it's something I heard from someone at the ROM. So they were doing, I think, a special day around bats, because of course they have, if you've been to the ROM, the infamous bat cave. And one of the programmers there was saying that she had a visitor come and talk to her while she was trying to talk about bats to a group. And the visitor was kind of standing on the fringe and kind of looking uncomfortable. And then after the talk was done, she approached the interpreter. And the interpreter had this little bat kind of puppet that she'd been playing with. Anyway, it turns out that the visitor was very, very afraid of bats and actually had a phobia and had gone to therapy for it. And the therapist had said, you should go to the museum so that you can be exposed to bats in like a non-threatening environment. And so she decided to go on this special bat day so that she could kind of be introduced to it. And the interpreter, programmer person just had the most wonderful story about how she spent this whole time talking to the visitor, and the visitor left, you know, with this wonderful experience, feeling a lot more comfortable. And I just thought it was a really cool kind of story about you don't always know your visitor, you know what I mean? Just everybody can come to the museum. It's really cool.
Mm-hmm. maybe not wildlife experiences, but I had a pretty great experience giving a tour over March break this past year. We had a mom and maybe 4 kids come through for the tour, and sometimes, you know, the parents are super gung-ho about, yes, let's go to the museum, but the kids aren't always that into it. And we were about halfway through the first house, about to move on to the second house, and the little girl looks at me and she said, you know, before we started this, I thought this was going to be really boring, but no, it's actually really awesome. And that story stayed with me. It was probably the highlight of my March break experience. That little girl, wherever she is, she's awesome, and it just turned out to be a fantastic tour. And as I said, highlight probably not only of March break, but maybe a highlight of the year. It was great.
Well, in adding one more story, a couple years ago, I was at a museum in I think it was in Regensburg in Germany, somewhere in Bavaria. Anyway, it was one of these big old castles, and it was all full of armor and all sorts of things. And I was like, oh, this is really neat. So it was like a Tuesday morning in September, and I was the only one in there, and I was walking around. And you know, I was going around, I was looking at these different castles things, and it was really just a great building. And I went into a doorway that I thought was the tour, that I thought was, you know, to keep on going down the hallway, and I ended up in a big tower, like one of those corner towers. And I looked around, and I was like, okay, where do I go from here? And then the door clicks behind me, and then I go to reach back on the door, and of course there's no door handle on it, on the back of it. And so there's stairs to go up on the inside. I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll go up the stairs. So I'm going up the stairs, and up and down, up and down. And there's no doors. And I'm like, what am I going to do? So I started banging on the door. And this older, I don't know if he was a museum employee or if he was a volunteer or what he was, but he came in, and he didn't speak any English. He's a very old guy, big mustache on him. And he was like, he's very, very annoyed that I was in there. And I was like, I don't know where to go, I don't know where to go. And he just pointed at me, and then he pointed at the door, and he said, out. So I got kicked out of the museum. I didn't get to see the rest of the suits of armor. It was very disappointing. If anyone is watching from the Regensburg Museum, you need better signage so that English speakers don't get lost. It was pretty scary.
Signage is so important, absolutely. I worked at Queen's Park at the Legislative Assembly of Ontario for a while, doing education there, and we used to get people coming in all the time, just having no idea what the building was, and we used to get the ROM all the time, or the University of Toronto, just because it was an old building in the middle of Toronto, and that's what everybody assumed. So yeah, signage is key. I guess another good question for you guys would be, what do you think is one of the biggest challenges for you in your job, or that you've faced so far that you've kind of had to overcome, and how did you do that?
Time management, being community engagement. It's a great title, and I get to do so many wonderful things, and I think we even touched on this a little bit earlier, but working at a small site, you wear many different hats. So trying to juggle volunteer management on top of membership management and booking speakers for a speaker series and giving tours and making connections out in the community. But oh my goodness, plus everything else, time management is huge. I'm very lucky that I work at a small site where I'm able to wear many different hats because it gives me a well-rounded experience. That being said, yeah, trying to find that right balance and making sure everything is getting done, I find sometimes challenging, but it's a fun challenge to try and live up to.
And have you overcome it, or what kind of techniques do you use to try to, take control of that?
Well, I'm very visual. I make lists. I'm very big on pen and paper and lists because I get great satisfaction of crossing things off. So being able to say I've actually done this and seeing the visual cue that look at what I've done. As well, I keep a journal of everything that I do. We report to our board of directors, and keeping this journal helps me stay on track so that I do know what I have accomplished. And I think being able to, again, visual cue, write down what I've done, really kind of helps me. But ultimately, the visitor is number one. So if it means that sending off those emails and getting things into the database has to wait a few minutes because I get to go share the history of our city, then it is what it is. But yeah, no, for me, it's visual, trying to see what I've done and see what I've accomplished.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. There was a lot of sort of kind of different ways of doing things around the museum for many years, especially in the 80s when things first got going. This brand new building, this brand new site was, people were very, very excited about it, and they brought in tons of stuff to donate. And for the first couple of years that I was here, what I was finding was I would go downstairs and I would find a box of stuff with the donation cards still in it from 1986. And it just hadn't been processed or anything. It was just sitting there ready to go. And there was a lot of that sort of stuff just because there was so much of it. And what I was finding was there wasn't a way to just concentrate on one thing and get it done. And I was very much in the mindset of, okay, first we have this task and we get it done. Then we have this task and we get it done. And we just sort of have one task after the other. So it was trying to get in the mindset of sort of working on multiple things at the same time and acknowledging that, you know, this is something we'll chip away at, and it's something that eventually will be manageable, which I think it is actually very manageable now. But 3-4 years ago, I was looking at this pile of stuff, just being like, "What am I going to do?" So a big part of it for me was figuring out time management, and also accepting the fact that I can't fix everything right now. And yeah, that's a big one for me, trying to overcome anxiety, I guess.
Yeah, Amanda, did you have one kind of a challenge that you faced, and maybe if you were able to overcome it, you know, how did you do that within your job?
Yeah, Lisa kind of talked about it a little bit. So time management for sure is one of my biggest challenges, even today. So what I started doing actually was creating a journal of some sort, just tracking my time. So allocating X amount of time to each project. That way I know how much I'm putting into each task. And that way I can monitor, you know, what needs more focus, what needs less time. So just really keeping track of how much time each project takes, and then trying to figure out if I could do it more efficiently.
And something I think is kind of interesting is we were talking to a lot of students last night, and it's such a different world being a student than it really can be in the sector. So kind of if you remember back to when you first made that transition, what was the biggest surprise for you? And kind of, you know, leaving school with certain expectations or ideas, and then actually entering the museum world and being employed and seeing that things are a little bit different. That'd be a hard question, but
it's always that attitude of you come out of school and you're so excited and you know all the best practice ways of doing things, and this should be stored that way and that's unacceptable and blah 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 blah. And it's figuring out a balance between kind of what the best way of doing things would be and what is kind of the reality of the situation. Because we do a really bad job equipping students to deal with reality, to be honest with you. We have sort of these sort of ideal sort of, and I guess it's sort of like, you know, old Navy pilots learning Morse code before they can work on the radios. You know, so you have a good foundation. But I think we do a pretty bad job of letting people know that, look, things are going to be messy and it's going to require a lot of work, and it's not always necessarily going to be perfect. I think that's a big one, and it's kind of coming to grips with trying to do things as good as possible rather than perfectly, and kind of accepting the financial constraints, time constraints, the work constraints, whether you have actual staff to be able to do things. You know, we come out of school just super jacked up, and then I've seen it with a few people. They come out and they're really kind of put off by sort of what's actually going on, and they have sort of at the 18-month mark, they sort of start to think, well, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I did the wrong thing. Maybe, this isn't working out how I thought. So I think that's a big thing. And I went through it. 100% went through it. And I've seen my friends go through it, and I expect it will continue to happen. But I think that's something to keep in mind, that life isn't always perfect, and that rings true in museums.
Yeah, very much so. You get trained best practices, and then you actually get into the field and realize sometimes the best practices just aren't useful at your site, or you just physically can't do it. Very good point. I think for me, just getting out of school, and what maybe surprised me was the fact that volunteering and putting my face out there got me that position. And even different opportunities that were out there and I was able to take advantage of. The other job I worked when I was in my first year in the field was as a visitor host at the Ontario Science Centre. And I was able to meet people and learn things. So maybe perhaps if I had a little bit of advice, if you're in that little bit of between stages, take advantage of any and all opportunities that could come your way, because you never know what you could get out of it, whether it's eventually getting that full-time position or just meeting some awesome people and building networks in a field and in a field of study, science, that you never thought you would meet. I've got a history background. I last took science and in high school. You touch on it a little bit in the program, but completely opened up my eyes, and it was something that I took a chance on, and I think I'm forever rewarded. So I think maybe going to what Christine asked, I was a little bit surprised with some of the opportunities that you could be presented with, and I'm very happy that I ended up doing it.
And just building on that a little bit, you just reminded me, so much of what we do in the field and across many fields, a lot of it is learning how to speak the language of the field and learning how to learn kind of the cadence of how things are spoken and how people say things, and it's an important thing to be able to kind of communicate on equal sort of level with people, using the same words, meaning the same things. Yeah, so that was another big thing that just something you reminded me of, Lisa. A big thing that I was taught, sort of learning how to speak the language, and not just of museums, but also of working in a municipality and local government, and all the stuff you see on Parks and Rec actually rings very true. those town meetings they have, it's scary how accurate that is. But yeah, it's a big part of starting out.
Do we have any more questions?
Maybe a little bit more generally, and first, jumping back to bring my executive director swears by Parks and Rec. It's one of her favorite shows, pure and simple because those budget meetings, she swears rings true. It's eerie, she says sometimes. A little bit more general, we all got into the museum field because we love going to museums. For some of us, we might be art geeks, history geeks, Canadiana geeks. If there's any museum in Ontario besides your own that you should visit, what do you think it should be and why?
Selfishly, I'm going to say the Lake of the Woods Museum in Kenora, because Ontarians should see their province. But also, personally, selfishly, I would love to go to the Diefenbunker. I'm excited for the next time that there's any sort of conference or PR opportunity or meeting in Ottawa, because I'm super excited to go check it out. I think that seems like a really cool site. So, yeah, that's what I would check out.
Yeah, I'm working at we're not quite a living history, but we are a historic house site. I love historic house museums, and I would have to definitely give credit to the City of Toronto Historic House Museum, Mackenzie House, Spadina House, Gibson House, and the Scarborough Museum. I know I'm missing a whole bunch of them, but they do a fantastic job. Each one tells a little snippet of the Toronto story, and when they do, they've got very dedicated people there who do a great job. And just recently I visited the Waterloo Regional Museum and was completely blown away, not only by their new shiny new building, but also it kind of opens up to Dune Heritage Crossroads, and they do a great job. And again, you're kind of immersed in 1914 Waterloo County. Really, it was a lot of fun. And I'm kind of kicking myself. I went to school in Waterloo and that I didn't take advantage of going to the great sites that they have there. So students, if you're out there, take advantage, see some of the museums in the cities that you're studying. How about you, Amanda?
Use your OMA pass, just saying.
How about you, Amanda? Is there any museum that you think people should visit?
Yeah, I definitely think the Gardner Museum is an awesome museum. A lot of the times it's overshadowed by the ROM because it's right across the street, and a lot of times people don't notice that it's even there. But I think it's an excellent museum, and they have a lot of great hands-on workshops. I know I've taken some of their, I guess, clay throwing classes where you can build something and actually have it baked afterwards and take it home. So I feel like they have a lot of awesome hands-on programming that people should take advantage of. And even the textiles, sorry, not textiles, the ceramics, sorry, they're beautiful, and they have a really awesome collection that I think people should check out. So Christine or Lisa, did we have any more questions for tonight?
No, I'm not seeing any on social, and that's more than okay. I've been tweeting along some of these questions as the night has been going along. So if you do check out the hashtag #GoEMP. If you weren't able to join our chat tonight, please feel free to comment at any point, because I know I'll jump back in the conversation. Braden and Amanda will probably jump back too. And this video is also going to be on YouTube. So if you get a chance and check it out, and you have a burning question, or you want to jump in and give your own thoughts, comment on the video, and we'll be happy to chat along that way.
Also, if you have any ideas for a future chat, please let us know what you'd like to hear about. Okay, so with that, maybe we'll say goodnight.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us on behalf of the OMA. Thank you so much, and we hope that you'll join us at conference in a few weeks, and hopefully for a future virtual hangout again.
All right.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Good night, everyone. Thanks so much.